There's probably something that you are not doing as you prepare for your upcoming IELTS test, and that is actively practicing your pronunciation. Poor pronunciation can really hold you back from the score you're trying to achieve. So in this video, we're going to talk about some of the key features of pronunciation and also how you can practice them. If you don't know, I'm Kevin. I'm a former IELTS examiner and I'm a current IELTS speaking teacher, and I'm here to help you get the dream score that you deserve and you're working towards. Today, we're going to talk about three key features of pronunciation: stress, intonation, and rhythm, and I'm going to give you some ideas about how you can practice those. First, let's talk about why pronunciation matters. First of all, it's 25% of your total IELTS speaking score. So even with perfect grammar and vocabulary, if your pronunciation is lacking, it can make it harder for your listener to hear and understand you. Also, and very importantly, good rhythm and intonation can make your speech more engaging, can make you sound more interesting, and can make you easier to listen to. A lot of students think if they're making all of the word sounds correctly, that is the end of pronunciation study. And that is simply not true. There are other features that are just as important to master. Especially if you're a student coming from a country where your mother language is tonal, like in Vietnam, sometimes it's a little more difficult to master intonation and stress, but there are ways to do it. You just have to practice appropriately. So let's talk about stress. When we're talking about stress in English, we're talking about emphasizing the right part of the word, and we're also talking about emphasizing the right part of the sentence. This can be especially confusing in English because the stress often changes depending on what part of speech it is. For example, the word import. If we're talking about a verb, I import computers into the country, we're stressing the first syllable. If we're talking about the noun, these computers are imports, we stress the second syllable. There's really no way to know unless you're aware of the parts of speech you're using, and quite honestly, unless you're hearing it being spoken by a native speaker. Often, words that are related often switch the stress around. For example, it's photograph with a stress on the first syllable, but photography or photographer with a stress on the second syllable. Again, these are things that you just have to know. So how do we practice this? Besides by listening to a lot of English so you get an idea of where stress lies in a word, you can use a free app like Google Translate. Speak into your phone microphone or your computer microphone and see if Google recognizes what you're saying. It doesn't matter about the translation. If Google recognized your speech in English, you're doing a good job. Intonation is our second feature, and it's something that my students in Vietnam really struggle with, but it's important. It's important because it can completely change the meaning of the sentence. For example, let's take the sentence, "you're going." If I say it with a rising intonation at the end, "You're going?" it's a question. If I say it with the falling intonation, "You're going," it's a statement, maybe even an order. You can see how this is really important as you speak English because it lets your listener know what your meaning is, what you are actually trying to say. I really think that the only way to appropriately and effectively practice intonation is by shadowing a native speaker. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have access to a native speaker, but it does mean you have to look up video clips or TV shows of native speakers. I would suggest taking a sentence or two, recording it as you speak into the phone, and play it back and see if you're matching their intonation patterns. Now, what programs do you choose? Well, I would stay away from programs like news programs, documentaries, that sort of thing, because people speaking in those types of programs really keep their voice at a level speech. I think situation comedies like Friends, The Big Bang Theory, How I Met Your Mother, anything that you enjoy is good to listen to because it's showing people in somewhat everyday environments and you're getting an idea of how they would speak. As an added bonus, I think shows like these can also give you a really good idea of colloquialisms, of phrasal verbs, of the idiomatic statements and phrases that we use in everyday life. Finally, we're going to talk about rhythm and the words that we put stress on in a particular sentence. Now, English is stress-based. That means that important words carry the rhythm of the sentence, and we often de-emphasize unimportant words. Words like the, is, things like that. Things that are not necessary to get the meaning across. This is why you might struggle with English listening sometimes. Many times my students say, "Oh, I can't hear this word. I can't hear that word." Well, that's because the speaker is really kind of pushing that word down and not giving it any stress at all. If you're speaking at a native speed, it's easy for those words to almost completely disappear. How do we practice rhythm? Well, like intonation, I really think the only way to practice rhythm is by shadowing a native speaker. That means, again, picking a clip or a short video that you like with good speech, recording yourself saying it, listen to both, and compare. It's not always easy, but over time you will get better. Some other ways to more fully understand and see how words are pronounced, where the intonation and stress lies, is to make sure you're always using subtitles. For example, if you're watching the show Friends on Netflix, some of those words are going to be difficult to understand. But if you're watching with subtitles and paying attention to the words that are being dropped or disappearing, it will really give you a better understanding of how the words are said. Also, as I said before, use Google Voice Translation. Practice saying words and sentences, even paragraphs, into Google Voice and see what the speech recognition hears. Again, it doesn't matter that it can translate it into your language. We're not using that feature. We're using the feature of, does it understand the English you're producing? If Google does a pretty good job of understanding the language you're producing, then chances are your human listener will also do a pretty good job. Remember though, like everything else, pronunciation has to be balanced with fluency. You are not doing yourself any favors if you take 1 minute to say a sentence with perfect pronunciation and perfect intonation and perfect stress that you could actually say in 20 seconds or 10 seconds with pretty good pronunciation, pretty good intonation, and pretty good stress. Fluency is always key. It's the foundation that the rest of your answer and skills are based on. So what's the recap of the video? There are 3 things we need to worry about. We need to worry about stress, intonation, and stress in the sentence or rhythm. We can practice this using free tools like Google Translate, Google Voice Recognition, really any type of voice recognition, and also mirroring native speakers on YouTube or on shows on Netflix or other streaming services. Pronunciation is something that really gives my students a lot of anxiety. So if there's a particular thing in pronunciation that you're worried about, leave a message in the comments below and I'll see if I can help you. As always, leave me a like and a subscribe, and until next time, happy studies.